In this video, we'll cover psychosocial development in emerging and established or early adulthood. Specifically, we'll look at the relationship between infant and adult temperament, personality in the five-factor model. We'll talk about adult attachment styles, Erickson's stages of intimacy versus isolation, talk about the different factors that affect attraction and the different types of love, as well as adult lifestyles and factors that influence parenting. So first up, talking about temperament and personality. We first discussed temperament back in chapter 3. It refers to the innate characteristics of the infant, so the things that are strongly influenced by our genetics, including mood, activity level, emotional reactivity, things like that that are noticeable soon after birth. So do our temperaments remain stable as we age? Thomas and Chess, who are the ones who studied those traits and came up with the categories of easy, slow to warm up, and difficult infants, they found that infants that they had classified as easy tended to grow up to be well adjusted as adults, while those who were classified as difficult tended to be less well adjusted. Kagan noted that inhibition to the unfamiliar seems to be a particularly telling trait. When exposed to unfamiliarity, some infants reacted very strongly by crying loudly and flailing their limbs. And research has indicated that shyness in infancy is linked to social anxiety in adulthood. Functional MRI scans have shown that strongly inhibited toddlers have higher amygdala activation, so showing essentially a lower threshold to experience fear and anxiety. It takes less for their amygdala to trigger fear. Overall, research suggests that temperament is stable for many throughout their lives, although environment still has an impact. So if you remember epigenesis from chapter 2, refers to how environmental factors can change our gene expression by switching genes on or off. Both cultural and environmental factors can influence temperament, so things like parenting style, socioeconomic status, exposure to teratogens, and more. Personality is the combination of our temperament and cultural and environmental influences. So it is the characteristic manner of thinking, feeling, behaving, and relating to others. So I always like to say that temperament provides the foundation for personality, and then our experiences, those environmental and cultural influences build on that foundation to create our personality. So the five-factor model, also referred to as the Big Five, is one of the most researched personality models that we use. And unlike some of the other popular personality tests that are out there, this one was actually developed by psychologists and tested for reliability and validity, and even for cross-cultural accuracy. So Robert McRae and Paul Costa are the ones who developed the Big Five model. Basically, they researched large numbers of personality traits and found that certain traits tended to cluster together, forming these 5 general dimensions of personality, which can be remembered with the acronym OCEAN. So O, openness to experience. This refers to how interested in new experiences or new ideas you are, how imaginative, original, curious. So if you score high, right, you really like new experiences, you're very curious and imaginative. Excuse me, compared to if you score low, meaning that you prefer more stability, more consistency. I'm trying to think of a better word that's a little different. More practical. How about that? So conscientiousness refers to how planned, organized, orderly, hardworking, controlled persevering and punctual you are. So if you're scoring high on that, those are the traits you're exhibiting. If you score low on conscientiousness, you're more impulsive, careless, disorganized. Extroversion refers to how sociable, talkative, active, outgoing, confident, fun-loving you are. So if you're scoring high on that, if you're scoring low on extroversion, you're more reserved, retiring, sober, more calm. Yeah. Agreeableness, how friendly, warm, trusting, generous, and good-natured you are. So if you're scoring low on agreeableness, you're more uncooperative, even suspicious, or ruthless. And then finally, neuroticism, which refers to emotional stability. And this isn't for like diagnostic purposes. That's not what this test is designed for. We have other personality tests designed for that. So this is not referring to clinical levels of anxiety or anything. So neuroticism refers to how anxious, worrying, tense, emotional, and high-strung you are. So if you score low on neuroticism, then you're more calm and secure and self-satisfied. If you're scoring high, more anxious, right? So previously, personality was thought to not change in adulthood. And although it is pretty stable for most, significant life events like illness or divorce can alter personality. Additionally, we do see some general shifts in our personality in adulthood. Longitudinal studies have discovered that neuroticism and openness to experience tend to gradually decrease with age, while conscientiousness tends to increase. The trait of conscientiousness has also been correlated with job and relationship success, better health, and increased longevity. Another throwback to some of our earlier chapters, talking about attachment. So that attachment referring to that close emotional bond that develops between an infant and their primary caregiver or caregivers. And that theory was created by John Bowlby, who noted that a child's attachment to their primary caregiver becomes their internal working model or set of expectations for future intimate relationships. So Hazen and Shaver actually wrote out brief descriptions of romantic attachment styles of adults using Ainsworth's original 3 classifications. So the secure attachment style, the insecure avoidant style, the insecure, anxious, or ambivalent style. And you can read those. I won't read them all off by any means. But yeah, this is one way of looking at how does that early infant caregiver bond influence us later on. Other researchers like Bartholomew believe adult attachment is better represented by where you land along 2 dimensions, attachment-related anxiety and attachment-related avoidance. And that leads to 4 categories. So attachment-related anxiety, the extent to which an adult worries about whether their partner really loves them. So how much fear of rejection and abandonment you have. And then the other dimension, how much attachment-related avoidance you have, whether you can open up to others, whether you feel you can trust and depend on others, or how much do you fear dependency or limitations of your autonomy. So the secure attachment, low on both avoidance and anxiety, refers to people who are not overly worried about their partner's love for them and don't avoid opening up, trusting, and depending on their partner. The dismissing avoidant type, people who are not overly worried about their partner's love for them, but do avoid sharing deeply personal information, tending not to trust their partner, and not wanting to depend on them. Preoccupied, willing to share, trust, and depend on their partner, but worried that their partner doesn't really love them or doesn't really love them or doesn't love them enough. So these individuals often tend to be prone to jealousy. And then finally, the fearful avoidant, high on both anxiety and avoidance. They want a close relationship, but they frequently worry their partner won't love them enough, and they don't feel comfortable trusting or depending on others. So what does the research say? Adults with insecure attachments typically report lower relationship satisfaction. More daily conflict is reported by people with high attachment-related anxiety. People with avoidant attachment usually give less support to their partners. So do people with particular attachment styles attract the same style? Although most people report wanting traits like kindness and trustworthiness in a partner, traits that characterize a secure attachment, it does seem that birds of a feather flock together, meaning that securely attached individuals are more likely to end up with a securely attached partner, and insecure types with insecure types. It's hard to determine if secure people attract other secure people or if secure people help an insecure partner become securely attached, or if it's some combination of the two. And what about infant attachment? Does it determine our adult attachment? Short answer, no. It is just one of many factors that influence attachment in adulthood. It's important in that it can provide a good foundation, but even if you do have insecure attachment, later positive relationships with siblings, relatives, teachers, and friends can help to lead to a secure attachment style in the future, or as an adult, I should say. So Erikson's psychosocial conflict of early adulthood. He believed it was between intimacy and isolation. And this is reflected in a young person's thoughts and feelings about making a long-term commitment to an intimate partner. It can also be fulfilled through close friendships as well. So Erikson defined intimacy as redefining oneself in order to forge a new identity with a partner without losing oneself. And so he believed that you need to have your identity established, the positive outcome of that teenage conflict figured out before achieving true intimacy with a partner. Otherwise, your partner's identity might overwhelm yours, or you might define yourself solely based on the relationship. Young adults who experience the negative outcome of this stage are often lonely, and they may fear relationships. Again, showing that attachment-related anxiety or avoidance. So what makes us like others? That's what attraction refers to, what makes people like or love each other. So one of the big factors is similarity. People usually select partners who resemble themselves in attitudes, values, personality traits, educational plans, intelligence, mental health, and even physical attractiveness. Having others like and believe in the same things we do makes us feel validated in our beliefs. And this is known as consensual validation, right? We're both validating each other. I like you because you like and believe the same things I like and believe. And this doesn't mean you have to be a carbon copy by any means, but we do tend to prefer partners who have several similarities to us than partners who have several differences. Self-disclosure. This is the tendency to communicate frequently without fear of reprisal and in an accepting and empathetic manner. Being able to share our needs, fears, and goals helps us to deepen a relationship. It is important, though, for self-disclosure to be roughly equal. So if only one partner is sharing, it's less likely the relationship will last. And finally, proximity, the extent to which people are physically near one another. We are more likely to develop relationships with people or nearby because we see them more often. And this tendency to prefer stimuli, such as people that we've seen more frequently, is called the mere exposure effect. Yeah, just seeing things more often, we tend to like them more. The people we are most likely to see often are people who are in close proximity to us. Friendships. Friendship can also fulfill intimacy needs, especially in emerging adulthood, as many delay making long-term romantic commitments. Friendships between men and women do tend to differ in a few ways, although, be careful of generalizations. But yeah, generally, male friends are more likely to focus on sharing information, coming up with solutions, and doing activities together. Female friends, on the other hand, are more likely to express emotions and discuss problems in their relationships. Sometimes friendships can fall by the wayside once a person has a romantic partner, or sometimes like single friends might get replaced with couple friends. So it's important to still be aware of those friendships and find balance between them and romantic partnerships. Robert Sternberg's triangular theory of love identifies intimacy, passion, and commitment as the components of romantic relationships that shift in emphasis over time. So essentially, Sternberg believed that you can have different types of love and that love can change. And if you're wondering if that name sounds familiar, yes, it is the same Robert Sternberg who came up with the triarchic theory of intelligence. He likes threes, I guess. So let's talk about the three components. Intimacy, referring to feelings of psychological closeness, affection, and connection. Essentially, it's emotional intimacy, right? Passion, on the other hand, that refers to sexual attraction, physical closeness, and romance. And then the third component, commitment, deciding to maintain a relationship. So Sternberg noted that passionate love tends to be strongest at the beginning of a relationship, but will gradually decline in favor of intimacy and potentially commitment. Although, I mean, hopefully the passion doesn't completely leave. Otherwise, you're going to have a different type of love. And so you can see here, if you just have intimacy, that's referred to as liking. If you just have passion, that's infatuation. And if you only have commitment, that's empty love. So if maybe a couple has fallen out of love, but they're staying together for the sake of their children, that might be an example of empty love. We also have the two component types. So romantic love, where you have passion and intimacy, but there's no commitment, or at least not yet. Companionate love, which has intimacy and commitment, but the passion's not there, the fire's not there. And so really you're more like companions than lovers. And then fatuous love, which is where there's passion and commitment, but no intimacy. And I always think of this as like a crazy night in Vegas that ended up at, the drive-through wedding chapel. So yeah, right, passion, commitment, but maybe that intimacy is not there. If you have all three, though, that is consummate love: intimacy, passion, and commitment. So adult lifestyles, singlehood, the most common lifestyle in one's 20s, and more individuals are choosing to remain single as well. Reasons include that they haven't met the right person, they don't have financial stability, they're not ready to settle down, or they feel they're too young to marry or have a serious relationship. Hookups. Hookups are uncommitted sexual encounters, and they are also becoming more common. This is thought to be due in part to earlier puberty and later age of marriage and having children. So we have this longer period of time during which we are sexually mature and unattached, right? So 70% of sexually active 12 to 21-year-olds report having had casual sex in the past year. So again, fairly common. I mean, 70%, that's definitely common. Friends with benefits, referring to casual sex between friends, although there is the concern there that one person might develop romantic feelings for the other. Generally speaking, males are usually more willing to engage in casual sex than females, and this is thought to be due to the greater potential costs of sex for women and gender role expectations regarding casual sex. Again, that double standard of, a woman being seen as a slut, essentially, as promiscuous, whereas if a man has several partners, he's seen as, the man, as cool, as, um, seen in a positive light as opposed to a negative one. Online dating has also increased. More and more emerging adults are using dating apps and online dating services. Catfishing, though, is one risk of online dating. I mean, it's definitely easy to lie, to hide your identity. So there are definitely concerns. Cohabitation or living together with a romantic partner has become increasingly common in many cultures. It is more common among emerging adults than marriage, and has increased among those between the ages of 25 and 34 as well. There are three suggested explanations for why we've seen this increase in cohabitation. First, the increase in individualism and secularism, and the decrease in religious observance. Second, the growth of industry and modernization, which has improved women's social status and has led to greater equality and sexual freedom. So marriage isn't the only type of long-term relationship that they can enter into without, social backlash. And then third, with many jobs requiring advanced education, many are going to college or other post-secondary training and delaying marriage. So cohabitation relationships might serve as an alternative to marriage. For some, it serves as a stepping stone to marriage, like a intermediate step, right? So it depends. It can be like the pinnacle of a committed relationship for some, and for some it's seen as part of the journey to the goal of marriage, depending on the individual, of course. Cohabitation rates are very high in the United States, Great Britain, Australia, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. In non-Western cultures like the Philippines and China, we're seeing increases in cohabitation, but it's still far less common due to more traditional gender norms. In China, it is sometimes seen as innovative, and so it's more common among those who are more highly educated and those who are more exposed to Western culture as well. So let's talk about marriage. It has declined worldwide over the past several decades, with the biggest declines in France, Italy, Germany, Japan, and the United States. This decline is thought to be due to delaying marriage and that increase in cohabitation as an alternative to marriage. In 1960, 72% of adults were married. In 2010, it was only 51%. The median age at first marriage has also changed. So in 1960, it was 20 for women and 23 for men. In 2010, it was 26.5 for women and 28.7 for men. So many of the reasons behind this increase in singlehood and cohabitation apply to why there's been a delay and a decrease in marriage. We're also seeing more countries passing laws protecting same-sex couples' right to marry. Though at least 29 countries have passed these laws, most in Europe and the Americas. So culture definitely has an impact on selecting a mate. Endogamy rules indicate the groups that we should marry within and those we should not marry. Many cultures encourage people to marry within their own race, social class, age group, and or religion. And this helps to reinforce group cohesion. These rules encourage homogamy or marriage between people who share social characteristics. Most US marriages are homogamous in regards to race, social class, age, and to a lesser extent, religion. Couples also tend to be homogamous in terms of their personalities and interests. Again, that similarity factor is a strong influence on our attraction. Historically, marriages were arranged, and it wasn't until the 18th century in Western Europe that marriages based on personal choice started to become the norm. And a lot of these marriages were gained from eloping, right? A couple would run off and then seek permission to marry after, which parents would then typically give because there's the concern about the consummation of the union happening. So yeah, in India, where arranged marriages are still the norm, they are declining. Parents are more often taking their sons and even their daughters even their daughters. But yeah, even their daughters' opinions into account when arranging marriages. Young Indian adults are also more likely to choose to elope to get their parents' consent for a marriage. Again, kind of forcing their hand a bit. And I mean, it's kind of interesting because arranged marriages do have lower divorce rates. But for those of us who are from cultures where arranged marriages are not the norm, that definitely seems counterintuitive. But in fact, yes, arranged marriages have lower divorce rates than marriages of choice. So how can you make a marriage last or a long-term committed relationship? Researcher Dr. John Gottman has studied relationships for decades, and he's found that keeping relationships strong very much depends on constructive communication, especially when discussing conflicts. So John Gottman has done extensive research on communication, on what makes the marriage last or what leads to it failing. The key components are summarized in his idea of the sound relationship household, which is kind of a metaphor or model for the relationship. The foundation includes things like love maps, fondness and admiration in your relationship. The house, right, is supported by things like trust and commitment. And he's written multiple books and also worked with his wife, Dr. Julie Schwartz Gottman, who's more of a clinical psychologist as opposed to a researcher, who has helped him develop a lot of techniques and tools for couples to use. So Gottman, his extensive research is super impressive because it's gotten to the point that he is able to predict with over 90% accuracy whether a couple will stay married or get divorced based on listening to them talk about an area of conflict for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that. So very, very high degree of accuracy. Some additional findings from his decades of work, avoiding, what are known as the four horsemen of the apocalypse, or otherwise known as marriage killers, which that doesn't tell you anything. Marriage killers, yeah. So let me talk about those four horsemen briefly. I think our textbook goes into it more. But the four horsemen, or the marriage killers, are criticism, so attacking your partner's personality or character, usually with the intent of, making someone right and someone wrong. Contempt, attacking your partner's sense of self with the intention to insult or hurt them. And that can be like insults and name calling. That can be, hostile humor, sarcasm, mockery, tone of voice, body language, like sneering or rolling your eyes, things like that. And contempt is actually the #1 predictor of divorce. We also have defensiveness. So if you see yourself as the victim, this could be, making excuses, cross-complaining, disagreeing, whining, things like that. And then stonewalling, which is withdrawing from the relationship as a way to avoid conflict. But it tends to convey disapproval, separation, disconnection, even smugness, rather than actually being neutral. And so that can be just being silent, removing yourself physically, changing the subject, giving those one-word responses, things like that. There are antidotes that Gottman goes into for dealing with the horsemen, using a gentle startup, taking responsibility, building a culture of appreciation, and doing physiological self-soothing. I'll link to a video where he shares his research, so I don't have to go into all of these things. The accumulated positive deposits, that is referring to helping do, nice things, treating your partner well, so that when you hit like rough patches, right, there's enough positives in there to make up for negatives. And the magic ratio. What another thing that Gottman's found through his research, negatives hurt more than positives. So it actually takes more positive interactions to counter out or cancel out a negative interaction. And that ratio is 5-to-1, 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction. So again, I'll put a link to a video where he shares some of his additional findings. But yeah, very, very interesting stuff. For anyone in a long-term committed relationship, or even just a relationship period. Next, talking about some difficult stuff here, intimate partner abuse. Intimate partner abuse is disturbingly common. Women 18 to 34 years of age experience the highest rates of it. Intimate partner abuse is often separated into 2 categories: situational couple violence, which refers to violence that occurs when a heated conflict escalates, and intimate terrorism, where one partner consistently uses fear and violence to dominate the other. Men and women equally engage in situational couple violence, but men are more likely to use intimate terrorism. Female survivors are more likely to experience rape, severe physical violence, and stalking, while male survivors are more likely to experience slapping, shoving, and pushing. The National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey was last completed in 2015, with data from more than 5,700 women and more than 4,300 men. It found that almost 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men experienced some form of contact sexual violence during their lifetime. Nearly 1 in 5 women and 1 in 39 men have been raped. More than 1 in 4 women and more than 1 in 10 men have experienced contact sexual violence, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner, and reported significant short or long-term impacts such as injury or PTSD. People who have experienced these forms of violence are more likely to experience frequent headaches, chronic pain, difficulty sleeping, poorer physical and mental health overall. So it's very critical for cities to provide gender inclusive safe houses, crisis hotlines, and support groups for medical professionals and for medical professionals to screen for victimization during healthcare visits. Um, so influences on parenting. So many factors influence parenting. And we've talked a bit about parenting before, more from the child's perspective, here a bit more from the parent side. So the three major groups of influences on parenting are the characteristics of the parent, the characteristics of the child, and the characteristics of the contextual and sociocultural environment. So parent characteristics include things like the parent's age, gender, beliefs, personality, developmental history, their knowledge of parenting and child development, and mental and physical health. So for example, parents who are high in agreeableness, conscientiousness, and are more outgoing generally tend to be warmer and to provide more structure for children. How an individual is raised influences how they parent, and the parenting received may serve as an example of how to parent or what to avoid as a parent. The child's characteristics, gender, birth order, temperament, and health status impact parenting, and parenting impacts a child's behaviors in a bi-directional relationship. For example, a child with a difficult temperament is harder to calm, and so parents may feel less effective. This can lead to parents being less patient and more punitive with the child. In terms of contextual and sociocultural characteristics, things like socioeconomic status, religion, politics, neighborhood, schools, and social support influence parenting. So parents who are under a lot of stress due to economic hardship, for example, may be more easily frustrated with their children. Cultural influences include things like individualism and collectivism. Are children encouraged to be more independent or to work together? Are they encouraged to be more competitive or cooperative? Things like. Last but not least, talking about the impact of COVID-19 on emerging and established adulthood. So most people recover from COVID-19 within a week or two, but some continue to experience symptoms even after they're no longer infected. 72% of long haulers are between 30 and 70 years old, and they are more likely to be female. Another alarming finding is that almost 1/3 of long haulers were asymptomatic, had no symptoms during their COVID infection, but began to experience symptoms months later. While the symptoms of long haulers vary, some of the most common are brain fog, anxiety, depression, lung and heart problems, kidney issues, and diabetes. 30 to 40% of long haulers have reported improvement after receiving a COVID vaccination, although we're not sure why. Research is continuing to explore what causes long hauler symptoms and how to treat them. Many people experienced weight gain during the lockdown, with one study finding that people gained 1.5 to 2 pounds per month, fueled by binge watching TV, playing video games, eating snacks, not having much else to do. Hopefully this trend will reverse as people have returned more and more to pre-COVID activities. Mental health also significantly impacted during the pandemic. And this is seen very clearly in this figure here, with only 11% of adults reporting symptoms of depression or anxiety between January and June of 2019. In January 2021, that number had increased to 41%. Several populations experienced mental health issues, including emerging adults, those who lost their job or income, parents of children under 18, especially mothers, communities of color, and essential workers. Substance use also increased as people struggled to cope with stress, loneliness, and I mean, there were fewer healthy alternatives available. Additionally, many clinics and support programs for substance abuse closed down, and that made it difficult for people with substance use disorder to get treatment. Overdoses also increased 18% during the beginning of the pandemic. Telepsychology and telehealth services increased tremendously during lockdowns. They had been used to some extent previously because remote care does reduce barriers to people who lack childcare, transportation, or live in areas that don't have a clinic available. Due to the positive outcomes, increased use of telepsychology is likely to continue. Again, a lot of people like how convenient it is. It reduces barriers for people to get access. So likely that will continue. Domestic violence, it increased during the lockdowns, as many advocates warned. In the United States, several cities had a 20 to 30% increase in domestic violence calls. Increases were also reported in China, Spain, and France during their lockdowns. Some places eventually tried to remedy the situation. So Spain and France started using hotels for people who needed to escape an abusive situation. Great Britain allowed victims the right to leave their homes during the lockdowns. But yeah, definitely a hard situation, a bad situation. The percentage of 18 to 29-year-olds living with their parents set a new record at 52% in July 2020. So emerging adults are already common for them to live with their parents, but skyrocketed during the pandemic. And this occurred in rural and urban areas across racial and ethnic groups. The most common reasons for moving in with parents, college campuses closing, losing your job, and or other financial reasons. COVID also caused 4 times the job losses as the 2009 recession. Young workers, women, the self-employed, and low and medium skilled workers were most impacted. Among high skilled workers, there was actually some job growth, particularly in the tech industry. In the past, recessions typically impacted men the most. However, the COVID recession has been called by some the she-cession because of the reversal of this trend. Women were doubly impacted because they're concentrated in the industries that were most affected by COVID. So hospitality, childcare, and education. Also, many women had to reduce their hours or even quit in order to take care of their children with schools closed. Hispanic, Black, and Asian women were even more impacted than white women. So lots of various impacts for emerging and established adulthood. And that wraps up psychosocial development. Thank you.